Firas, Iran Project Director for the International Crisis Group, and with Firas Maksad of the Middle East Institute. You're both based in the United States. Having sort of let the dust settle, as it were, over what has been a sort of very conclusive election for Donald Trump, it looks as if he may get both houses in Congress as well. What might we expect going forward? Firas, first from you. What do you make of anything we know of his Middle East policy at this point?
Becky, it's good to be here with you and with Ali too. I think, listen, when it comes to the Middle East, there's this general sense out there that the return of Donald Trump means a return to maximum pressure campaign against Iran and a much more hawkish approach to push back against America's adversaries in the region. And the reality is it's much more nuanced. We have two camps under that tent of Donald Trump. There are the isolationists there, like the former director of national intelligence, Sir Grenell, others like Tucker Carlson also. And then you have the foreign policy hawks like Brian Hook, who you just had on your show, and Mike Pompeo, who's angling to be Secretary of Defense. We're going to have to wait and see. As you know, in Washington, they say personnel is policy. So we're going to have to wait and see who gets appointed to what key foreign policy position. But I think it's important to point out that there are these two competing trends within the Donald Trump campaign.
Yeah, the neocons, the more hawkish sort of approach to the region, not least Iran, and then those that you might consider, I guess, on the more moderate sort of end of action. Ali, let me bring you in here because during Trump's first presidency, of course, he significantly intensified pressure on Iran, which experts say increased its isolation and crippled its economy. The Iranian foreign minister said today that the US election provides, and I quote him here, opportunities for revisiting and reconsidering unjust and ill-suited approaches. You might say he would say that, wouldn't he? What's the sense in Tehran? Is it clear? I mean, how much concern is there about what happens next?
Vicky, it's great to see you and be here with Firas. Look, the reality is that Iranians are in a particularly vulnerable position on the one hand. Iran obviously has witnessed a series of upheavals in the past few years, and the regime's legitimacy, I think, is at its lowest point in decades. And that, to many people in the Trump administration who've been dreaming of regime change in Iran, is a very attractive prospect for doubling down on a pressure-centric policy towards the Iranian regime. Iran economically is in more trouble than it was when President Trump withdrew from the nuclear deal with Iran in 2018. And Iran in the region is weaker than ever because Hezbollah is on its knees and Hamas has been significantly degraded. But on the other hand, in 2018, when Trump withdrew from the deal, Iran's nuclear program was rolled back and put in a box and under very heavy monitoring. And as a result of Trump's withdrawal from that deal, that program was put in a microwave, and Iran is now closer than ever to the verge of nuclear weapons, and so it has more leverage. And we have to see what kind of balance we will end up in the Trump administration, as Firas said, in terms of personnel. But I fear that President Trump is too wrapped in an anti-Islamic Republic ecosystem to be able to side with those who are advocating for de-escalation deal-making.
Interesting. Firas, let me bring you back in here. What we do know, as we await to see what policy is implemented in region, what we do know is that the balance of power here has frankly changed significantly. The degradation of Hamas and Hezbollah on the part of the Israelis and the attack on Iran's military infrastructure has very much shifted the balance of power. Benjamin Netanyahu, of course, was quick to congratulate Donald Trump on his election win, who, as we know, has stated he wants the war in Gaza to be over, something that might thrust Netanyahu's legal cases back into the limelight. How will Donald Trump deal with this relationship with the Israeli Prime Minister? Has he made any indications at this point it is any different than the sort of, bro-fest they've had in the past?
Yeah, well, Becky, first, let me make the point that we still have about 2.5 months of the Biden administration, and that could prove to be a crucial transition period, although we keep referring to it as the lame duck. And one of the things, the surprises that I anticipate we might see is a mega deal between the Biden administration and Saudi Arabia, perhaps short of the previously conceived normalization between the two countries. But in a less for less approach, we might nonetheless see a deal that sees a major defense commitment short of a treaty with Saudi Arabia in return for cooperation on civil nuclear, on AI, and strategic tech, and a whole bunch of other issues. So I think there are still surprises when it comes to the Gulf, and potentially also when it comes to the war in Gaza and Lebanon. Of course, we're still anticipating an Iranian response to the Israeli response, and so there is also the potential for a major conflagration between Iran and Israel in the region in these crucial 2.5 months. Now, when it comes to Donald Trump, I would say that it's much easier said than done when he promises to end these wars. I think President Biden learned the hard way that the local actors, i.e. Benjamin Netanyahu on one hand, who's got a whole bunch of complicated domestic politics and personal considerations to deal with, but also Hamas and Hezbollah, they have more agency than many think. And I think, therefore, President Trump will have